Well, friends, good morning and welcome. I know we've reached the 11:30 time, and I know that Katie is being kind and letting some additional folks in. First, let us begin with a special thank you to Katie Lineberger for serving as our producer today. She's waylaid a lot of anxiety, and I know that she will trust and move us along. Katie serves as the DVA for the URE district and is also pastor at Main Street in United Methodist Church in Albemarle. So we thank her very much for her time and her work. One of the things is that as we go along, if you have any questions, we trust that you will put those into the chat box for any questions as well as any expectations for why you are here today. We want to make sure that our time honors your needs, and we'll move this along. And thank you for being here. We're going to take a moment and just begin with introduction of the presenters this morning. And we will begin with the esteemed David Christie.
Oh, well, yeah, esteemed. Um, hey, everybody. My name is David Christie, and I serve currently as the Catawba Valley District Superintendent in the picturesque 5 counties of the Catawba Valley. And I'm glad to get to be with you all today.
All right. And up next, then we have Kathy Odell.
Hi, everyone. As she said, my name is Kathy Odell. I serve and still wear several hats at the conference office. I do a little HR consulting along the way. So some of you may have had me come and speak with your SPRC committees in the past. Prior to that, I did spend about 10 years as the HR director at Pfeiffer University. So you may have seen me there. Currently serve as the district lay leader in the URE district, and happy to be here today.
And friends, my name is Sherry Barnes. I serve currently as the senior pastor at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church in Charlotte. I also serve in the Board of Ordained Ministry. I'm grateful that Kathy and I got to know each other through my work at Pfeiffer. And so this is a great opportunity for I've served in various iterations of ministry staff. And so throughout our time today, we had two primary goals. One was to offer practical insights on how to lead a ministry staff, and that's the name of this workshop. So if that's not what you signed up for, you were in the wrong place, and I trust that we can get you to the right one. And during this time, you're going to hear conversations from the chairs of the senior pastor, from second chair and staff, and also from the staff parish relations committee. The other goal that we have today is just to provide some resources because we all need resources. Friends, when Shannon first reached out to David and I, Shannon Lemaster Smith, who is another wonderful resource, who is also in this workshop, first reached out to David and I about leading it, she shared some of her reasons. And Shannon wrote that after having conversations with many youth pastors, children's ministers, and others who have served as associate pastors, both clergy and lay, she found a common thread. Many did not feel supported by their senior pastors, and others didn't feel supported by their staff parish relations committee. And she offered some examples. Senior pastors who practice the adage of don't do as I do as I say, who commanded and enjoyed special perks not available to the rest of the staff, and often applied a double standard with respect to the practice of vocation and avocation. She learned of discrepancies in the allocation and use of benefits, especially time, such as vacation time or sick time or offsite work. She often she learned of a lack of communication, the practice of, and I doubt that this will be surprising to any of us here, micromanaging, the dreaded micromanaging, as well as poor conflict resolution practices, and the list continued. Friends, when I read the list, I cringed. Then I said it ain't so, and then sighed because I have been there. I've served on staff as a pastor in charge of a church with little to no staff, and also now as a senior pastor at a staff church. And as I've experienced these struggles and as I talked to David, a biblical model came to mind. And that's found in Exodus 18, and it's the story of Moses and his father-in-law, Jethro. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes this morning just to kind of ground us in that biblical word. In the lesson, we are told that Jethro, who was a priest of Midian and father-in-law to Moses, had taken his daughter Zipporah and children home with him for safekeeping. And then the time came for them to be reunited with their husband and father. And upon their return, we hear Jethro's prayer of thanksgiving for God's goodness and offered an offering in response to that gratitude. The next day, we're told that Moses took his father-in-law to work. And Jethro saw that people were standing before him all day long, from morning to night. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that, saw what Moses was doing for the people, he said, "Friend, what's going on here? Why are you doing all this by yourself, letting everybody line up before you from morning to night?" And Moses responded in the way of many a church leader, "Well, there ain't no rest for the wicked, and the righteous don't need none." And Jethro responded, "No." And then, according to Eugene Peterson said, "Be there for the people. Let the matters of concern be presented to God. Your job is to teach them. Your job is to show them how to live. Your job is to keep a sharp eye out for competent men and women. And they, together as a team, will share your load. And then you will all have the strength to carry out what God commands. And the people will flourish because of it." So the good news for us is that Moses listened and they all lived happily ever after. Well, maybe not so much, but that ending serves our work for today. There's a wonderful article by the Lewis Center that suggests there are 5 lessons from this story. 1, it's not about you. 2, seek to offer good instruction. 3, build a team. 4, trust that team. And 5, always listen to good advice. So friends, for the remainder of our time today, that's what we hope to do. We will be reminded that it is not about us, but about service to God's agenda and kingdom. We will offer, hopefully, and receive good instruction from one another. We will be learning about a good team that employs mutual trust. And we will also hear and share good advice. So over the last 8 weeks, David, Kathy, and I have listened to good friends, colleagues, and leaders, and we've asked them 3 questions that hopefully you're going to hear good answers to today. 1, what are the expectations and contributions of a lead pastor to ensure fruitful ministry and discipleship? 2, what are the expectations and contributions of a second chair leader to ensure fruitful ministry and discipleship? And 3, what are the expectations and contributions of or as a member of the Staff Parish Relations Committee to ensure the same? So before we start with the additional presentations, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. I know y'all are excited about that. And if you're watching this later from home, then you can just talk amongst or to yourself. And as we get ready to go into these 2 breakout rooms to start, the questions are simply this: who in your ministry experience has been your Jethro based upon the story that you've just heard? And the second question is, what is one piece of advice that you have from that Jethro that you will continue to carry with you that you received from them? So again, who in your ministry experience has been your Jethro? And what's one piece of advice that you've received from them that you will continue to carry with you? And if you need, the questions are in the chat. You'll have 5 to 7 minutes in the breakout room. And Katie is just going to send us off into this lovely thing called breakout rooms. And we'll see you back here shortly, friends.
But I'm going to eventually talk. I won't tell you what's coming up. I want to talk about the 3 questions Sherry shared, which is hard to say, Sherry shared, from the senior pastor perspective. And I have 4 senior pastors from across our conference, different sized churches, boys and girls, all that stuff. And I'll share some of their answers. You'll get all of that later, because wait, there's more. You'll get all of that later. It's a gift that keeps on giving. You hoovered this baby and it just keeps coming. You'll have a chance to ask any questions in the chat box. I think that's what you young kids call that thing. So ask any questions as we go along, and we'll talk through it. And I'm going to share just some general stuff I've learned, mostly from messing up a lot. And I thank the 5 charges that I have served who taught me a lot, whose staff members taught me a lot, and whose church folks taught me a lot. So the important things that I have learned is to be yourself first and foremost. I remember starting out with leading staff, and I tried to be other people who were much smarter than me. And I quickly realized I can't float that boat. I just need to be who I am. And secondly, don't begrudge the work and time it takes to lead a staff. At my worst with staff, I've sort of adopted the attitude of just do your job, and that's not helpful. At my best, I think I have understood that this is a great example of the body of Christ all working together. And when I finally realized that a very important part of my job was to work with staff and create a culture in the church, I became a lot healthier, and I think our church became a lot healthier. And the largest staff that I worked with, what that meant for me was 1 day a week, I said, this is my day that I am definitely here, and anybody can come in, and you know that there is this time beyond staff meeting. One of the bad things I did as a leader was put full-time expectations on part-time staff. That is not fair and is not good and does not build the, hey, ain't we good kind of team. So just be aware of that. I think it's important that whoever the senior leader is becomes an advocate for the staff, for everybody on the staff, and that the church folks hear us telling good and positive stories about our staff and the teamwork that is created. When we elevate ourselves above others, we get into trouble. It is teamwork, going back to the Jethro example that Sherry started with. In the best staffs I've been a part of, we would spend time throughout the year reading some books together, maybe books on leadership or church work. One of the last ones we did was The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni, which was really helpful, and we talked about that. And different staff members led the discussions. We've been able to make sure with the staff parish relations team that we have liaisons for each staff member, a really important thing in a way a senior leader can be an advocate for the staff. If we don't do anything else, we need to pray together. And I'm a big fan personally of staff meetings, regular, with an agenda. But if the only thing on the agenda is to pray for each other, that can be a good meeting. We need to do that. We need to invite participation. I think it's important that we know the history of the staff, each member, and the history of the staff itself. I came into a new setting where the staff parish provided breakfast for the staff on like the first whatever of each month, which was really cool. And I went in and grabbed a bagel and started talking. We had prayer time, and everybody was just sitting there. And I said, "What's wrong?" And somebody said, "You didn't tell us we could eat." And I laughed, because who am I to tell people to eat? And they said, "No, you don't understand. This is where we've been." And I went, wow, boy, that was eye-opening for me. So I didn't know that because I didn't take time to learn who they are as a staff. And it's also important that we share our history too. Communicate, 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 communicate. I know that goes without saying, but I'll say it again, communicate. Don't assume that that conversations have happened, because very often they haven't. Express sincere appreciation in authentic ways. I'm a big note writer. I enjoy writing because I talk a lot. And when I say thank you, people maybe don't hear it as sincerely as I mean it. So I enjoy writing notes to folks to say, hey, I prayed for you and I thank God for you. One of the things that's become important to me is to trust God enough to trust the people doing the jobs to do the jobs. If I'm going to do their job, we didn't need to hire them. And I'm wasting all kinds of time. So trust God enough to trust the people doing the job to do the job. We have differences on staff, and I would say celebrate those. We oftentimes I've asked a counselor to come in and lead us as a staff in Enneagram work and Myers-Briggs and whatever, because we're different people. I've had to realize everybody doesn't process out loud. And when I go, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? People go, man, just calm down. And I need to recognize that. And when we've had those times, it's helped me understand, maybe don't push so much. And again, that's the beauty of the body of Christ, right? We're all different and we need those differences. Celebrate those. Staff retreats are great. Talk to other leaders about how they do staff meetings. I still enjoy just visiting other churches and seeing how their staff meetings work. Share the work of that and have fun in what you do. I want to share quickly because my time's drawing to a close, but it gets better from here. It gets better, I promise. So don't quit us. The questions we asked, and I'll tell you I'll just share briefly, but you'll be getting this in an email. Ain't that a blip? The senior pastors I asked for comments were James Howell, who's senior pastor at Myers Park, and Young Lee, who's senior pastor at First Rutherfordton, Sally Queen, who's senior pastor at Myers Memorial, and Glenn Kinkin, who is a senior pastor at Centenary. And the first question was, what are the expectations of yourself as a senior pastor in guiding the ministry of the staff in the church? And quickly, I'll go through these. That I love my staff, notice and encourage them, that there's nothing I won't do for others. I always seek harmony and peace among staff because church members who drop by during the week can easily pick up the atmosphere in the church office. To pour myself into forming them spiritually, I choose my staff and executive team as the places to really invest that energy and first in, last out leadership. The second question, what are your expectations of and needs of church staff in guiding your ministry and that of the church? That they will step up and lead in their areas of responsibility, that they'll speak truth to me and to one another, that they would put the church's overall health first when they go about doing their jobs. I expect that they shepherd the areas to which they were assigned, and to always do your best. And the last question was, what are your expectations or needs of the staff parish in guiding you in your ministry? One answer is not to try to supervise, but to be encouragers, to give wise counsel, and to think strategically. That the SPRC chair and committee members approach a pastor and staff as people first who are doing God's kingdom work, that they will support and appreciate the staff and not to micromanage the staff. And then I asked a question, do you have any best practices? And somebody said, yes, our staff parish chair attends our monthly staff meetings and joins us whenever they can. To have meals together, to party at times, to have lots of short meetings, monthly one-on-one meetings, and to communicate expectations. So again, you're going to be getting some resources, and a lot of our resources about leadership are the same, but each of us put down some things. You'll be getting those and follow-up emails, but we are really grateful for your time and appreciate this opportunity just to share. I do think that it's talked about, we talked around the edges about it, but anytime we can keep people from triangulating and instead just have really honest conversations, that's so important. People do pick up on staff uneasiness when they come into a church. And God's work is way too important to let our pettiness get in the way. I had to discover a long time ago that that I while I'm there, I hope I'm friendly to everybody, but I don't have to be best friends with everybody on the staff. We are about God's work. It isn't about me and it isn't about them. So we want to seek that together. But I'll shut up. I know. Please hold your applause. I'll shut up so that this is one of the things you've been waiting for, because this woman hails from Upper Lower Mesopotamia, where she won the Alligator Wrestling Championship of 2012. You know her, and if you don't, by golly, you love her. Give it up, everybody, for Sherry Barnes.
David, thank you. The other thing that I will simply add following all of that is that there is a way to bottle David's energy, then he needs to do it, because that's something that's absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. David, one question before I start the alligator wrestling. Although I have handled poisonous snakes in church, but we'll talk about that another time. Do you want to ask them, our folks here gathered, the questions that you had
Yes,
posed?
I didn't want to suck the life out of them, so I'll ask quickly.
Okie dokie.
Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
So here's one question, and you can either, type in your little chat machine there, or you can make that thing, click that button that makes you talk where everybody can hear you. If you are or could be leading a staff, what would be the most important things to keep in mind as you lead? That's a very broad question, but if you are or could lead a staff, what would be? Oh, it's in Katie, the producer. Wow. Okay. What would you keep in mind? The vision of the church? Thanks, Lanny. Always important. Listening, not one of my strong suits. Thank you, Marianne. Anybody else? Communication is processed differently. Thank you. Yes. Values-based decision-making, gratitude, appreciation, and communication. What they came with today, appreciation. There's more than one right way, amen, to do something. Individuality and unity, both important. Thank you. Thank you. And so a second question, if you are or could be leading a staff, what are some practical things you can do to help people feel like a team instead of individuals doing their jobs? How can we create teamwork if we are leading a team? Say we, yes. Listening, learn, lead. Celebrate team victories, yeah. Yeah, and that goes with our staff parishes as well. And I know Kathy will talk a lot about that. I have found in my experience, some of the greatest mentors I've had have been staff parish chairs who have taught me more about myself and made me look at things. And I appreciate that. Yes, spend time together. something fun outside of the church or work.
I'm all about the potluck. Amen. Food is good.
Amen. Food is always good.
Food is good for the soul.
Well, thank you all for those responses and for thinking through this. So now the alligator wrestler herself from parts unknown with a one fall 15-minute time limit will hit us. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, David. And I trust that David and Kathy will also keep me on point as well. Preachers have a tendency to ramble. Friends, what I wanted to share with us just for the next few minutes is when we were talking about how to lead a ministry team, and again, in response to Shannon's request, then we also wanted to provide input and insight from second chair folks. Over the last 8 weeks, then now I specifically, whereas David listed names in association with responses, I did not. I just simply said that for purposes of anonymity and allowing people to just be honest in their responses of what was required from them and from their seniors, that we would do it this way. But all I know is that having served and led from the second chair, I really, really appreciated everybody's willingness to visit with me. And so I'm just going to highlight some things. And again, as David has suggested to you, you'll get a copy of this. And what I would trust is that after this is done, because I know there are 97,000 workshops this week, and as we sort through all of those, that maybe you will have time to look at these words from colleagues and just see where it resonates with you or with your staff. So here are some highlights in asking them the questions of expectations and contributions from a lead pastor to ensure their ministry success. Some of the things that they lifted up was to welcome failure, to embrace experimentation and innovation. We can quickly embrace a corporate or a secular view of success. And so to, welcome failure, to try things, to not always have all the complete answers before it starts. A couple other things were clear expectations, know your context. Not all churches, not all staff or congregations can be led or managed in the same way. To share, don't hoard information. I'm a plotter and a planner. And so right now I've got, preaching themes and ideas going to next Easter. But it's difficult for staff to be able to respond and do their job well if they're going only given information a little bit at a time, or if they are working with a senior that views information as power. Information needs to be shared, not hoarded. One thing I learned, and I thought this was interesting, is that affirmations are good, but not essential. One suggestion in staff meetings is to consider the question to your staff: what word do you need from me today? Do you need a word of encouragement? Do you need a word of resource? Do you need accountability? Do you need affirmation? Identifying going into the staff meetings or just in conversations with your staff, occasionally it's good to ask, what are you looking for? That clarity. We've already talked about empowering and no micromanaging, a reminder that the work is a shared process, that there's a mutuality of purpose, and we are on the same team. We are not opposing each other. Listening. And David had already lifted this up, but one person lifted up to stay in your lane, assign, assist, affirm, repeat. Assign, assist, affirm, repeat. I think David put it beautifully where he said, trust God and trust the team that they're doing the work that they're empowered and hired and called to do. What's already been lifted up is communication, communication, communication. And one that I thought was really good was to be open to questions. When someone asks you a why question or a how question or a what question, to not be defensive in that. One of the things that we have highlighted for incoming candidates, as well as for ourselves, is to be curious. and to stay curious. And you can ask the why question in a way that is not condemning in any way, shape, or form, and it isn't explain it to me, it's help me understand. Help me understand what is going on here. We also ask them to identify expectations and contribution of self. This is some of the words that came from them. Always lead up, don't triangulate. If you have an issue, take it up with your senior pastor. Just take it up with your supervisor. Find the word, the space to do that. And that also implies mutuality and trust. Another thing for staff to assist the team and senior pastors was help him or her avoid landmines. Sometimes we are entering into a church staff where you've had someone on staff for, since Jesus was born. They can help you provide context, institutional knowledge, congregational story and history, so that those who don't know history are not doomed to repeat it. As a senior pastor is to offer words of encouragement and support, it's also the other way around. It's also okay to occasionally look at your senior pastor and say, hey, I'm praying for you today. I hope all things are well. Be honest about your struggles, be honest about your needs. Remember that we are all rowing in the same direction. Understand that your particular area of ministry is a part of a whole. You need, as a staff person, to embrace a wider perspective. I think all of us can get very caught up in our roles and assume that our world is the only world, and then worlds collide. But staff offered that they needed to remember that they were part of a whole and work on embracing a wider perspective. A couple other things that they lifted up for themselves was to avoid silos, and also to be open to questions and suggestions and to stay curious. That if someone asked them, so what are you working on? It was not an accusation that they weren't working. It's just learning and guiding and going forward. For the second chair, these were some expectations and contributions of the Staff Parish Relations Committee, our team. Job descriptions that are clear, concise, reviewed, and revised regularly. Some of us have come to churches where the last time a job description was undertaken, we might have a job description with a date of 2008. The world has changed a bit since then. So making sure that job descriptions are clear, concise, reviewed, and revised. Folks asked for a regular review and meeting with staff parish, one-on-one, where they could just go and visit with the staff parish committee to let them know kind of what was going on in their lives, personally, professionally, and as part of their job. They hoped that the staff parish would take an active role in the life of the staff to go beyond the job, offering soul care and encouraging self-care. Fair and equitable evaluations, fair and equitable pay, offer, encourage, and pay for continuing education, constant evaluation, and having clarity, and I think Lanny lifted this up in the chat, clarity for themselves as to the church's vision, the church's identity, the church's goals and objectives. So those were some of the words of wisdom from folks who are serving on staff, second chairs, youth pastors, associate pastors, deacons, elders, lay staff, all of the above from various size churches. About 20, not 20, about 10 folks invested in that information. For me, I just want to summarize with some things that I have found helpful. One, working with a staff, you need to know family systems theory, how families work and relate. If it was possible for every senior pastor to have a degree in marriage and family therapy, it might not be a bad idea. Just to understand that your staff is a family system. And to know how all of that goes together. Also, organizational management, to understand change, to understand conflict, to understand leadership. Organizational management theory is also very helpful to know. One of my favorite persons of resource is a beautiful person by the name of Susan Beaumont. And some of you may be familiar with her, but when you get the resource list, there are 3 books that I have read and just about committed to memory. When Aaron Met Moses, How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going. And there's one other, How to Lead a Large Congregation. I know I would also suggest to read Beyond Your Biases. Several folks lifted up a resource of Leading from the Second Chair by Mike Bonham and Roger Patterson. But I also am acutely aware that that is written by 2 persons of a specific gender and race and style of church leadership. I currently serve a church that in the last year has grown in its Hispanic and Latino ministries. One must learn to lead with awareness of culture, age. Okay, I know what generation I'm from, and working with staff who are Gen X and Millennial and Gen Z and Gen Y, that is all very different. So learning to lead with an awareness of culture, diversity of culture, age, gender, how men lead, how women lead are very different, and expectations of that. I could go on, but I won't because I know that I'm coming to the end of my time. And even socioeconomic status. The financial wherewithal of your staff is not going to be the same from staff to staff. There are 3 more things and then I'm done. 1, I would encourage everyone to take advantage of the leadership opportunities offered through the conference and also through organizations that share similar values, both nonprofit and for-profit. Disney, Chick-fil-A, the Center for Creative Leadership out of Greensboro, Duke, Wesley, all of these provide amazing opportunities to learn how to lead well and be led well. The last 2 things are, this works product is more than ministry success, has often been defined by corporate ladders or secular mentality. Friends, care of staff is about kingdom. It's also about an individual's discipleship. I remember Dr. Andre Resner 25 years ago looked at a group of clergy in a district committee meeting and said, remember your call and your practice of it is integral to your salvation. For you and for your staff, I think that that's a very good and healthy thing to remember. And lastly, to remember, and this has already been lifted up, one size does not fit all. It was funny in talking with the second chair leaders, their expectations of leadership, of staff parish, even of themselves varied widely. So it's back to David's point earlier. It's really getting to know your staff. And again, if I can lift up that family systems theory, I would definitely do it. So I think I did that within the minutes allotted. Hopefully, yay. We've given lots of wonderful time for Kathy Odell. But before we move there, then questions 2, and I've got to find them. And you can unmute yourselves or put it in the chat. And I know we're all multitasking, so that's okay. To consider a time when you had a good boss or a good supervisor. What were some of the practices that they inhabited well in their work? When you, as an employee, felt valued in that boss or supervisor, what are some of the practices they inhabited well? Thank you, Mary Ann. Specific feedback, appreciation, affirmation. That's always a good one. Others? What's something that you saw in a good boss? Willing to name the elephant in the room. Yep. Avoidance is a strategy, but it doesn't work well. Trust, opportunities for growth. Any others? Despite the title, they saw me as an equal in ministry and not a baby. Amen. That age thing, Caitlin, you're right. They gave direction, but didn't micromanage. They allowed, Karen, thank you. They allowed you to be you. I have a quote in my office that is from Oscar Wilde. It says, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." And I think that a good leader, a good supervisor allows everybody to live into that well. Well, friends, that brings me to the conclusion of my conversation. Now we get to the person that really knows what she's talking about, because David and I clearly do not. And so I'm grateful for the friendship and the leadership from Kathy. She has taught me much over the years. So can we give a round of applause and welcome Kathy Odell? It'll be a quiet because everybody's on mute, and I'm going to become so. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for hanging in here, because I realize that you have just missed who won the big deal of the day on Price is Right. You gave that up today for this. So thank you all for sticking with us and not leaving to go see who that. Pastors that are on here, I'm sure that over the years, you've not had people knocking down your door saying, "Please let me be on the SPRC. Please, please, please." And those of you that are laity on here, I'm sure that that wasn't the first job you raised your hand for when they were asking for people to staff the committees. Most people shy away from that because often there's conflict that has to be handled. And not every church has someone with an HR background to help navigate some of those things. And most of us hate to provide feedback to others. Some of the feedback you've given to Sherry and David about the best supervisors you've had or people you've worked with in ministry are those that gave you feedback, that helped you be yourself, but yet gave you some information along the way. If you don't have someone in your SPRC that's good at that, or your chair that will take care of that, who does that often fall back on? Unfortunately, the pastor, right? The pastor gets to do all of that feedback, especially if there's negative feedback to be given. It's not often talked about, but most people aren't aware that employees of the church actually are still governed by Department of Labor guidelines. We often think that nonprofits, especially churches, don't have to follow wage and hour laws, that they're not bound by those things, but unfortunately they are. So I'm going to get into some practical areas here that your SPRC may or may not be aware of. And as pastors, maybe it's information you can share back with them. All employees are subject to minimum wage unless they're covered by ministerial exemption. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. They must meet the guidelines of an employee and be designated as exempt or non-exempt. Those terms get a little confusing. Depending on the culture of the church, this may be more formal or less formal. There isn't one size that fits all when it comes to these things, but all positions, as Sherry said, need to have a job description. We all want to know what's expected of us before someone comes and tells us we're not doing what we should be doing. One of the things that David said that I liked is that we shouldn't put full-time expectations on part-time staff. You're right, you shouldn't, not only for the reason that that's not fair, but it's not legal. So don't put those full-time expectations on your part-time staff. As I said, all positions should have some kind of written job descriptions. That's never a problem until it's a problem. I've met with a number of SPRCs over the years, and normally it's because there's a staff issue that they're not really sure how to handle. And often it's because someone isn't doing what they expect them to do. My first question is, well, is it in their job description? And if it is, then I say, well, when's the last time that you had any type of a review with them? When is the last time you talked to them about whether they were meeting their expectations? And often find out that that has never happened. I think also David said how it's important to have a liaison between the SPRC staff and your staff so they know that someone is listening to them as well. So one of the biggest issues I see churches paying employees a salary rather than an hourly rate when their job description would be interpreted by the Department of Labor as a non-exempt employee. People often get confused by the terms non-exempt, hourly, salaried, exempt. The terms hourly and non-exempt are used interchangeably and would normally apply to jobs in your church that are clerical in nature. That means that they're not less important. You know how important those jobs are, but they don't have significant decision-making ability. I often use this example. I'm sure that the administrative assistant in your church can decide what type of copier paper to buy. But if you're going to get a new copier, there's probably 14 committee meetings that need to happen and the trustees need to sign off on it, right? So that person doesn't have major decision-making authority. Even if you call that person an office manager, their job description and the tasks they're allowed to do probably would still indicate that they're a non-exempt or an hourly employee, and you should be tracking the hours worked and paying them accordingly. Non-exempt employees are eligible for overtime for any hours over 40 in a week. That again, you can't let them volunteer. They say, well, that's okay, I don't mind. I'll stay. You don't have to pay me. Well, that's nice, but that's not legal either. If they're working, they need to be paid. There are some exceptions to that. If your administrative assistant wants to volunteer in your soup kitchen, that is not their normal job. So that's perfectly all right for them to come in and volunteer in something like that. Now, a salaried or exempt employee would be those that meet the definition of exempt according to the Department of Labor. That would indicate that they're exempt from being paid overtime. Professional designations like teachers, those with degrees in music, would fit into those categories. And then there's something called a ministerial exemption. You can work your minister as many hours a week as you want to. You don't have to pay him a dime more. Sorry about that, pastors. But still, you've got to have some limits there. David, don't be looking at me like that. I see you up there. Yeah. So when you look at those that are called in the ministerial exemption, that could even be your minister of music or your youth pastor, any of those that their job is to help promote the faith within the church. Could be even your choir director who helps pick out songs for the week that would enhance the worship experience and help people feel closer to God. There's so many different paths this can take that there's just no way we could cover all of this in one session. There'll be some handouts, just like with the others, that you can take and look at later. My contact information would be there if any of you ever feel that it would be helpful for me to come and speak with your SPRC or meet with your SPRC chair about specific situations. I'd be glad to do that. The conference, I do work still kind of on a contract basis with them, so that phone call doesn't cost you anything, and talking to me is always free. I just hope the advice is worth more than what you're paying me. One last category that I want to just touch on for just a second would be the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. Employees, SPRC manages employees. Independent contractors, of course, fall under the trustees of the church. So that's one difference there. But I've worked with many churches that have just felt like it was easier to pay everybody that worked there as an independent contractor. That way you don't have to withhold taxes. You don't have workers' comp to have to pay. You don't give them a W-2 at the end of the year. They just get a 1099 and then they're responsible. Well, the IRS has some pretty definite definitions about how someone has to work with you to be called and qualify as an independent contractor. So here's a couple of questions to help you think about that. Does this person do the same job for anyone else? An example of that would be your janitorial service or your lawn maintenance. Is it Odell's lawn service and I cut grass for a lot of different places and I've got my own lawnmower? Then yes, you can hire me as a contractor. Is it Kathy's cleaning service and I clean, houses for a living and have my own business? I can be an independent contractor. But if the church provides the vacuum cleaner, the mop bucket, the dusting cloths, and all of that, and tells me when they want the church cleaned, then I'm an employee, I'm not a contractor. The issues that I've seen in so many places is that they have hired someone that went to church there and they've cleaned the church for 50 years. I actually met with an SPRC that was having this issue. And I said, well, is the job not adequate now? And they were very, very quiet, were very grace-filled, sometimes to a fault. And they finally said, one person finally spoke up and said, well, that bug has been under the pew in front of me for 6 months. Okay, so they probably were not doing the job that they needed them to do, but nobody wanted to talk to them about it. So we talked through about how to manage that. The other question between independent contractor and employee is an independent contractor should have the ability to either make a profit or sustain a loss. A good example of that is a painter. If you'd like to have someone come in and paint your church, and you say, well, we'll pay you $10 an hour and we'll buy the paint, they become your employee. But if they come in and say, I'll paint this the steeple on your church for $2,000, and they do it in a day and a half, they've made a good profit. If it takes them 3 weeks to do it, maybe they didn't make much, but that would be a contract position. One of my dad's favorite stories was about a painter that painted a church, and the first time it rained, they had all of this streaking down the outside of the church. So they called the painter back in to come in and take a look at it. And while they're standing there looking at it, it's like this big clap of thunder and lightning flashed, and a big voice out of heaven said, repaint and thin no more. Sorry, guys, I had to do that. That was one of my dad's favorite stories. So if the church tells you where to do the job, supplies all the supplies, and they don't have any opportunity to make a profit or a loss, then they're an employee and not an independent contractor. So guys, I hope that some of that is helpful and some of the handouts will be helpful. I did have a little question for you there at the end that I think we can put in the chat box. And if you want to unmute and share without giving specific names or churches, maybe you could share a time when there was a staff you had who wasn't doing the job that you had hoped for, and whether a job description was in place or whether it would have been helpful.
And Kathy, I also liked your second question too of, how does your staff parish provide feedback
Yeah,
and support to staff?
yeah,
And the
yeah.
question
And my
maybe,
second
are
question,
they in the first place?
was, how does your PPR, SPRC provide feedback or support to your staff? You're required to do that for your pastor on an annual basis. And I hope that you have some mechanism in place to give feedback. It doesn't always have to be negative. We like to hear what we're doing right. So feedback is very important. All right, Sherry, back to you. I'm done.
Well, friends, I know that we have been at this for a while. Thank you, Mary Ann, that you do have staff parish liaisons. Again, I know from the second chair folks, some folks had no idea who staff parish was and had job descriptions that were 20 years old. So thank you to those of you who are attending or keeping up with those. So we're at the end of our presentation, yay for everyone, it's early, then you get to have like some lunch. Again, when we started, we said that the goal was twofold. One was to offer practical insights on how to lead a ministry staff from the various chairs, senior pastor, second chair, and staff parish relations team, and then to provide resources. And the resources will be coming to you from somebody. I think it's Havala, and will come either later today or sometime this week in a flurry of emails for all of the things that we're doing this week. So if there are any questions, I trust that Kathy, David, and I will make myself available to answer those even after today. Are there any closing questions? David, Kathy, anything that you want to do before we send folks on their way?
Well, I've been saving up a song to share with everybody.
Okay, awesome.
No, I haven't.
Oh,
That,
I think we're out of time, David. I don't think we have time for that.
well played.
I was
Well
about to say
played.
I could come up with a question right now to defer that.
Please, Will, save us.
I actually did have a question, and I was late getting here, and so I may have already missed this. But were there any specific helpful tips or ideas that y'all shared at the very beginning about leading a part-time staff? I mean, I heard a piece of that David maybe shared of, don't treat a part-time staff member like they're a full-time person. But I mean, as I'm thinking about like staff meetings or times to pull even times to pull everybody together to go do something fun that doesn't, create a burden on their family or outside commitments. I mean, for me, we have me and one other full-time staff member, and everybody else is part-time. So I'm wide open to any tips or suggestions folks have.
Well, I think one thing you could think about is planning something during their normal work hours. So you're not asking them to come back another time. If you can, go throw axes or, something, just don't stand in the way. But, find something that maybe you could do during their time, or find out what they like to do with their family and include their family if you can.
And
Yeah,
Will,
that's a
suggest-
great
oh,
point. Part
Go ahead,
of
David, sorry.
where I've messed up before is trying to get them on everybody else's time schedule, to Kathy's point, as opposed to just understanding, a lot of the churches I served had teachers who were the music directors. And, they aren't coming to a 10 a.m. staff meeting because they're teaching. And so, yeah, finding those times. But Sherry has a great answer.
All I was going to suggest, Will, was that to David's point and also to Kathy's, then we have a weekly staff meeting. One, I've always made sure that it works with the part-time folks schedule. We have a mix of both full and part-time. The other thing that we do is that I always have an agenda, and the agenda is more about this is everything that needs to be on folks' radar. That's made available whether you are a 5 hour a week or a 90 hour a week employee. And Kathy's not listening right now. But to the point is that keeps everybody on the same page. You can read it at your convenience. We just strive to work with the part-time folks' schedule. Now, and this is also a church currently where a lot of folks here are not church members, and so we don't engage families. Folks here are more comfortable with, I'll do work stuff with work people, me. You don't need to have a mandatory family fun day. And we're okay with that. But that agenda has been really helpful because then at least everybody's aware of what everybody's working on.
We've got a question in the chat. Marianne was wondering if you had any general thoughts related to dealing with conflict among staff.
I think we've mentioned a couple of those, and that's, bottom line, I would say prayer, no triangulation, direct, and depending upon the conflict, engaging one staff parish or other leadership within the church to address that, just keeping others in the loop so that doesn't become a he said, she said kind of thing. But again, prayer, addressing it, not allowing it to fester, and then just keeping, and I don't mean telling everybody what's going on, but engaging either the chair of staff parish or lay leader or someone that can, be present with you in it.
Yeah. One thing Sherry said early on was, about making sure you're treating everyone fairly, that everybody's, on the same level playing field. And I will say, if you have someone that is not fulfilling the responsibilities of their job, don't think you're the only one that knows that. Everybody in the church knows that person isn't doing what they should be doing. And if you don't address it, it only creates more angst for the rest of the employees. So sometimes if you think that there's strife between just a couple of those folks, there might be someone on your SPRC that knows that particular person and their personal situation that could help broker a solution to that strife.
And Randy put in that as staff, they studied Matthew 18, which that is great. I would also add, always document, because at some point it's like, I didn't say that, or that didn't happen. And contemporaneous notes are really helpful. That doesn't mean they get emailed to everybody, but the leader has that and can share that with the appropriate time with staff parish and even with the employee, to be totally honest.
And it's important not to meet privately without someone else, especially if there's conflict going on already, because as David said, I didn't say that, or, this is what I said and you didn't hear that. And so it's better to take, like if the pastor needs to speak with the staff, take someone from SPRC with you, not to look like you're ganging up on anyone, but to say, they're your liaison. SPRC is your, that's the people that support you, and we want them to be here to help us work through this.
And I've utilized that when there's conflict between staff members, even if it's not involving me, then I've engaged the staff parish chair or a liaison to be present in a conversation with an issue between two staff members, as well as for my own. And I'd also suggest, years ago, then I did some work with, and many of us have, with the Lombard Mennonite Peace Center, on conflict and conflict transformation. And that is still one of the most formative experiences that I've ever done in ministry.
Yeah, if it gets really bad, then they call me and I come in and I do it, and then I can go away and nobody's mad at me.
So Kathy's number for your speed dial is, no, I'm just kidding.
It is so important to deal with that, though, to Kathy's point. People see that, and if we think, oh, it'll get better, it usually doesn't, which is why it's just so much better to have the hard conversations.
Yes.
Well, friends, again, thank you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your attention, for your input, and for your wisdom. I'm going to put David on the spot. I know that he'll be shocked and surprised by that. But David, before we go, will you pray for the leaders that are here and for our work as we go from one another?
I most certainly will. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Let's do pray. God, we just pause and give you thanks for the amazing journey that you have set us on, whether we are employees, pastors, or lay members. You have called us to serve you, and we thank you for that. We thank you that we find a strange, warm place in our hearts about leadership, and we want to do it well so that it glorifies you. Help us to take that seriously, but never to take ourselves so seriously that we forget the privilege of the calling that is ours. I pray for all of these folks and give you thanks for what they do in this annual conference, for what they do for your kingdom. And we just pray that you will help us to serve you to the best of our abilities that ultimately gives you the glory. We are grateful and thankful that we're bound together. Please guide us as we do our best to serve you. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you
Thank you,
all.
David. Thank you, friends.
So y'all said something, there's like an email coming with a long list of all
Yeah,
the books that
well,
David's read the last year.
So much
Well,
stuff.
no, that
Will.
would be short.
So much stuff.
yeah,
It will have
well,
Kathy stuff.
Havilah is sending out follow-up emails
Sweet.
to each workshop that
Okay.
has a list of like all the resources. And they're also going to be put up on Cornerstone, which is kind of our conference, like learning platform resource center. So, but Havilah will get all that information to you.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye, Karen. Good to see you. Bye, Randy. Bye, Will.
Bye.
Rachel.